Hi everyone, my name is Marcel. On this channel we talk China stocks, and a particular focus of course is NIO and the EV industry in general. And we have to talk about the latest NIO ES8, so that's the flagship. Now it's on the NT 2.0 platform. I've taken a look at it in my latest visit to Shenzhen, and unfortunately I've got something negative to say, and I'm going as so far as that this model might flop, or at least we may get some really bad narratives out there starting pretty soon. But as you know, I'm a big investor on NIO, so this is not coming from a NIO bear, and in fact I think I try to bring this out here so to raise some awareness, maybe also with NIO, and watch it till the very end to also maybe see a little bit of a plot twist there, or a second opinion at least. So with that, let's start. Now let's start off and looking together at the NIO ES8 here. I filmed this during my stay in the Shenzhen NIO house, and let me first say this, I'm not a car tester. I want to stress this here on the channel. I rather look at the cars here from a analyst perspective, like, how does it fit into where the car and the company is positioned? Is this possibly a successful model that could reach a large addressable market, or what will be the margins around that? So this is kind of my perspective. If you really want a car review, then possibly you need to go somewhere else. But first of all, let's maybe start with some positives before I go into where I think there might be some issues with this car. Well, when I entered the car here, as you can see, immediately what is a positive impression here is the quality material. And this has been always like, the premium to luxury position of NIO cars. But I mentioned before, when I started to subscribe to the NIO ET7 in Germany, I was feeling that there was a little bit of a missing thing, like maybe just emotional, but, just getting the car, and it didn't really feel as premium to luxurious as previous NIOs, like from the, for example, the ES8, even on the NT 0.1 platform. But now getting into this new latest edition of the ES8, I can certainly confirm just my subjective views, that this sort of feeling is back. And I'm really happy with that, because I think, that's one of the expectations why I think this model could actually, lure buyers from BBA, so Mercedes-Benz, BMW and Audi, the German manufacturers, but possibly also, it's about gaining also back some sales from Li Auto, which has been selling very well, also partly due to the lack of availability of the NIO cars in the SUV segment, right? Another nice improvement that I like to see was that this had already the Banyan 2.0 version, and the software really felt more snappy than before. This was also one of the criticisms for NIO lately, given how competition has really caught up. And the trouble here was that it just sometimes didn't feel like this is the top notch that NIO should deliver, given its positioning on the software side before. But I think with this latest hardware and the latest entertainment system here, it seems back on track, and this is really enjoyable as a user experience again. Unfortunately, this somewhat great initial experience by the ES8 changed a little bit after I started to play around here with the second row of the car seats, and you'll see now the NIO stuff also trying to move the seat by pushing the button, which essentially didn't work. He said here like, oh, this is a little bit embarrassing, but the situation kind of continued when I showed him that also on the third row, the seats are actually not moving when you use the control in the back of the trunk. But the left seat just wouldn't move according if you push one of the buttons. And that really also kind of confused the sales stuff here. What seemed to have worked still was to control the second and the third row of the seats using the central screen and the software interface, because whenever I tried to correct the seating positions via that, it still worked, even for the one that didn't work actually via the trunk controls. So unfortunately, to my surprise, it was the case that NIO here kind of delivered a lemon, like a dysfunctional ES8 to the showrooms, because simply one of those controls simply wasn't working for the seats. And I think that's a pretty easy function to check, and also quite central, if you're a new potential car buyer, to come into the store and checking out how big is the trunk really, how can you move it, and stuff like that. So the fact that this was kind of presented in store quite obviously and not working was kind of a bummer to start with. Also, the sales staff was quite confused that some of these simple functionalities like pushing a button and changing the seat was not working. So it was confusing for both the sales staff and for me that this wasn't working. At that time, I just assumed that, well, this is possibly an easy fix, maybe just a software update. However, as we know that, the first batches of a new model can actually have some issues, and NIO actually had that before. Of course, it was really not a good experience to experience this on my own by myself here. And of course, if you want to position yourself as a premium to luxury manufacturer, competing with the German brands, stuff like this shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, this did not remain the only criticism and negative experience about ES8 here. The second problem that I had really was getting into both the second row and the third row. I'm not a super big guy, and still I had issues to get in and out comfortably. And other customers who also checked out the car at the same time, they also noticed how slowly the seats are moving back and forth. So I do assume that this seating issues will become a popular point of criticism for the ES8 here, unfortunately. I'm really not the tallest guy, and for me it was already pretty uncomfortable to get out of the car here. I don't see how this should work for somebody who's like 2 meters or a little bit more massive in stature. So I'm not seeing how this is actually ideally solved from a design perspective here for the flagship model. Of course, I didn't want to just leave it to one check, so I also went to another NIO house in Shanghai here and tested it with another model. At least the seats were working like the bottom, but still, I still had issues of getting in and out with no support, like handles and really this tiny space. So those 3 rows are really kind of squeezed in there and not really nicely accessible in my point of view, and will have issues with some potential buyers. Although the legroom I think was kind of okay, so no issues with that from my side. I think it's also to be expected that like the third row is usually a bit smaller and just for the kids. But overall, this doesn't solve the issue with how quickly the car seats here can be adjusted and how easy and comfortable it is to get in and out. Again, look how small this space is here to get out. It's really tight and cramped here to get out, and I really didn't enjoy this a lot. I think the seat, even if it's like in a very front position, is just too much covered still by the outer shell of the car here in order to get in comfortably. And again, just missing a way how I can grab something here to hold myself in order to get in. Maybe some kids have no issues with that, but I would certainly not let my grandma ride in the back of this car and get in there. So this is kind of a difficult thing to solve, and the main issue here is that this should compete with the Li Auto, and in that regard, Li Auto, possibly because it's still I think a larger car, should be much more comfortable for families. The good news is though that I also checked again the functionality of arranging the seats via the controls here in the trunk, and it did work with this other model in another store. So it seems that my experience with this car in Shenzhen was indeed a lemon that NIO has placed there, and possibly can be fixed easily with the software update, or at least is not affecting all of the cars being built. However, the reasons why I'm raising these issues here is that, of course, in this very competitive field of EVs currently in China, competitors will seek the advantage of against NIO here if the car has such kind of limitations, and we'll see that evolve in social media narratives. So competitors will place issues how difficult it is to get in and out of NIO cars or the ES8 here. I could imagine that Li Auto really likes that this design issue here with the ES8, and unfortunately also, let's say, short sellers and people who are getting against NIO will use this narrative in order to possibly destroy a new model like the ES8 from the very beginning. We've seen that with the with the ET7. We've seen complaints raised about the seating position of the ET5. In my point of view, most of these concerns are not concerns for most of the buyers, but they are being used in order to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the company. They're being used in order to make people refrain from buying NIO cars via social commenting and stuff like that. And so I think NIO should really be aware of such issues here. And unfortunately, it was just not a good sign to see that there are problems even with cars that are currently sitting in NIO houses. And unfortunately, the ES8 seems to have an issue here in that regard. Overall, though, I have to say this issue was limited to my experience with the ES8, and looking at the new cars here in China. This was now in Shanghai with the ES8, the ES6, the ET5 Touring, and the EC6. It's really nice to see this new lineup, and as I mentioned also about my experience with the ES8, especially on the interior side, NIO has done a fantastic job now with these new models. I think this is really the quality that they should deliver, aside from those issues that I mentioned with the ES8. It's more important that the ES6 doesn't have any issues, in my point of view, because this is the larger volume seller, of course, and frankly, personally, I didn't have any of such negative experiences when looking at the ES6. However, I would say these things that are raised here with the ES8 are something to consider, especially also when it comes to the social engineering of the public opinion about NIO, about the cars, but ultimately also from a quality perspective on themselves, right? It did show that there were lacks with how the service staff was responding or aware of this issue. There was a problem with the quality check in the NIO house and with the quality check by the NIO going out of the factory. And all of that shows that NIO is actually still having some problems here on the quality side, and possibly will face some backlashes in case of that the sales numbers are not as good as expected. So with that, let me know in the comments whether or not you find those issues that I've raised here interesting or not, how you view them, and yeah, let me know your thoughts about that. I'm curious to read it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.